Madam First Lady, I really want to congratulate you for your leadership and for making this possible. Mayor, thank you. Tomas, it was so kind with your words. Thank you so much. I also want to thank the presence of the Deputy Assistant Secretary General of the OAS, Dr. Mendez, and all the distinguished guests, Narda. And I am here today because I want to share with you that Belize is land of opportunity. And it is land, and it's somebody can help me here with the images. 1 second. It's a land where three colors are going to define the present and the future for many of the Belizean citizens, but also to trigger investment as this country deserves. So let me begin with this phrase by Winston Churchill. He said at some point that the empires of the future will be empires of the mind, which means that mind factors, knowledge, creativity, and human talent will be the differential context in a competing world environment. And if we assume that, we are in a paradise that combines not only the magnificent landscapes and maybe one of the most important coral reefs in the planet, but a paradise that integrates the landscapes with the talent of its people, with the Garifuna music, with the heritage, with the archaeological sites, and at the same time with a powerful young population that is now excelling in businesses as the Prime Minister described, like BPO. So the way that I want to initiate this conversation is that if we look to Belize in the upcoming years and decades, it will be a country where the orange economy, the green economy, and the blue economy will be the triggers of a transformation that can lead maybe to doubling, tripling, quadruplicating its GDP in a fast way. And why do I believe that? Because the orange economy, that is the economy that combines four critical elements. One that is heritage, another one that is media and the arts and creative functional elements or functional creations, is one of the most powerful elements today that can lead countries to a next level of growth. Why? Because this is based in talent. It's based in the combination of patrimony and heritage with tourism. But it's also the possibility for the arts, movies, series, advertising, architecture, education related to all these topics to be the force in which people are not just going to find a job, but be employed where the talent can excel. And many people don't know what the orange economy is. But just to give you an idea, in a country like mine, like Colombia, the orange economy is larger than the coffee economy. It's larger than mining. It employs more people than many sectors that are conceived in the common wisdom of our regular economy. And if we were to analyze how this economy is changing the world, just to give you an idea, if it were a country, it will be the 13th largest economy in the planet. In countries like the United States, it's 7% of GDP. And when we foresee what can it do as an export, it will become the largest export of the OECD countries. Why? Because it has intellectual property inside. So why do I think the orange economy can be land of promise for Belize? As Tomas will describe, I love soccer or football. And this team was very well recognized in the 70s as the mechanical orange, or the clockwork orange, or the absolute total soccer, total football approach. Why total? because it looked at every single player and how every player can contribute to maximize the benefit, the objective, the goal that is set for a team. So imagine if we look at culture as this team, and we believe that 7 arts, 7 primary colors, 7 marvelous in the planet can become 7 right policies in which all the sectors can contribute to trigger the economic transformation of Belize. That is a call for investors, for producers, for designers, for people who are in traditional industries that can serve the maximization through the sharing with platforms, OTT platforms, and the planet. And this is the invitation that I want to make today based on the Colombian experience as well. 7 single policies that can make the orange economy the next engine of transformation of Belize economy. And I will begin by reference this phrase by Gordon Gekko, the famous character of the movie Wall Street. Information is the best commodity that I know of. The first thing that is needed to trigger the orange economy is to measure, to identify how many business do we have in a specific country that are working in these sectors, to know how many people they employ, how much do they export, how much are they contributing to other sectors, how much are there being nutrients of other sectors. And that information begins with having the right satellite accounts in the national statistic bureaus. And many people say, is that easy? It's not. But is it possible? Yes, it is. And we did it in Colombia. We decided to create at some point a satellite account that combined culture and creativity with all the sectors and subsectors that are listed on the UNCTAD Creative Economy Index. And you know what it demonstrated? That it was one of the top 5 sectors of the Colombian economy. We identified that most of the founders and employees in this sector were people between 18 years and 40 years. So it's a major driver of youth employment. So imagine in a country like Belize, where you have almost full employment today, 2.8%, but you still are struggling with giving more opportunities to the youth population because, as a matter of fact, in Latin America, the highest level of unemployment is concentrated in the youngest population. Imagine what this can do if triggered, because it will allow young people to give their best in a sector in which they can contribute with the best of their human capital, which is their talent. But we're also able to measure the size of those companies. How long can they live as a company? So the information through satellite accounts that combine culture and creativity is the number 1 asset in order to make the right policies. The second thing is institutions. And the reason why I want to begin with this amazing image of the U.S. founding fathers is because, as important as the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution, was the obsession that the founding fathers of one of the strongest democracies in the planet was intellectual property. Think strategically on how to maximize the value of the orange economy. In the case of Colombia, we created the Orange Economy Council, and it was shared by the president. I shared it myself with the Minister of Culture, but we had the Minister of Finance, we had the Planning Director, the National Bureau of Statistics, the Minister of Education, Telecom, you name it. Because we were not thinking in silos and how much budget does the Minister of Culture has, or how much budget does the Minister of Education has. We were thinking strategically in how can we enable the sector to excel. And that's the importance of having the ministries of finance there. As I had a great conversation with Minister Chris yesterday, I said tax incentives, investment incentives can be the right trigger to bring resources. So for example, we created drawbacks when it comes to film and series, but we also did it with music. We also did it to thematical parks. And we allowed startups on the creative sector not to pay income tax for the first 7 years with the compromise that they will make a minimum amount of investment and generate a minimum amount of jobs. So institutions is the second ingredient to make this fast and furious, if we're going to use a Hollywood reference. But what is interesting is that the next component of this, if you have the information and if you have the institutions, is that the infrastructure is as critical as the energy infrastructure, the road infrastructure, the ports infrastructure. Many people around the world don't tend to see the value that cultural infrastructure can bring to a table. And I use this image because this is the Sydney Opera, considered as one of the most important UNESCO heritage sites in the world. It took 4 years to be built, at least at the initiation, but almost a decade. It was meant to cost $7 million, but it cost $100 million. The designer was basically laid off, and he couldn't be in the inauguration. Many people were hesitant about whether this was needed or not. And it happens that today the Sydney Opera is not only one of the iconic sites in the planet, but it's one of the most important cultural venues in Oceania, and is considered a must for every single opera high-end presentation in the world. And the reason why I highlight this is because when you have infrastructure for culture, and you combine it with tourism, and you combine it with landscape, and you combine it with the attraction of visiting a place, it can also trigger new sectors of the economy. So that's why surrounding the Sydney Opera, you have galleries, you have restaurants, you have design places, you have centers of national attraction, and you have one of the largest investment sites in the whole Australian territory. Now that's in Australia, but can we do things that are similar in our countries? The response is yes. What you're seeing here is the new Colón Theater that was inaugurated in Bogota before I entered my term. We accelerated this project because it was the largest cultural infrastructure investment in the last 40 years in Colombia. It has 4 of the top presentation sites for opera and dance, and is now fully curated to offer permanent services, cultural services and attractions to citizens, as it's also the host place for the Bogota Symphony. Now, does the government need to make these investments all the time? No. You can use public-private partnerships, or you can allow investors to develop this infrastructure with tax credits so that they make this an offer that is complementary to the typical tourism services and can become an additional attraction. So the cultural infrastructure is not only critical, but well done, can become iconic and can generate an individual ownership by citizens that become iconic sites for the world. And the other eye that I want to highlight, it's the industry. You have the information, you have the institutions, you have the infrastructure. What's that for? To trigger an industry. An industry that employs, that triggers investments, that motivates society, and that can create side impacts. And how can you trigger an industry? This is very important. You can do it by believing that culture as an asset, with technology, with employment, can position the image of a country in a way that is easier than any other traditional sectors. Just in the case of Colombia, as I mentioned, it's 3.5% of our GDP. But imagine if in a country like Belize, where you have almost half of the population just on traditional tourists, Because if you add the cruise tourists that come to the country, it can actually duplicate the country's population. But imagine if people will come to the country to film, to make productions, to make editing, post-production, sound. And imagine once that's triggered, what can happen to the employment of other people. Just to give you an idea, when Colombia began doing big series, some of the series, for example, Narcos at the beginning, almost consumed 7,000 hotel nights in just one season. Today, 100 Years of Solitude is being produced and filmed in Colombia. And it's triggering more than 2,000 or 3,000 direct and indirect jobs. That is an industry. But that industry also connects to the traditional industry of tourism that is seeking now new ways to offer better opportunity for the demand of the clients. You're going to have this weekend something historical here in Belize, Mr. Prime Minister. You told me that you're having the groundbreaking event of what's going to be the Four Seasons Hotel near San Pedro, La Isla Bonita, near this island. That is a trust message of one of the world's most important tourism brands. But what if that is combined with arts and crafts? What if that is combined with the Garifuna music, with the gastronomy, with the culinary, that simply transform the overall human capital of a nation? So industry can be triggered through incentives, but also through training, but also through scholarships, and at the same time, by giving the private sector the clear message that the orange gives a better taste to traditional economic sectors. And if we integrate the industry once it has been created, marvelous things can also happen. And I'm just going to share you an experience that we basically felt in Colombia with hope and honor. These are 4 series that have been achieved with the OTT platforms as one of the most watched in the Netflix platform, but also Amazon Prime and also Apple TV. As you can see there, you have Eco 3, the largest production until now in any Latin American country when it comes to series. Or Pálpito, that was produced in Colombia and became #1 in the world for almost 3 months, consumed all over the planet. And when people start watching this series and they see the locations, and the locations have beautiful landscapes, people want to go there. And actually this has triggered the interest of other countries that never thought Colombia was a destination for tourism to think about the country, and that has also triggered non-permanent resident tourists in our country. And that integration can happen in multiple ways. Sharing the content, the IP, but also co-producing. Because if you have some episodes or some scenes that are filmed here and then are shared with other sites of production somewhere else in the world, that co-production gives the nationality to the product as it was from each of the countries that has intervened. So that generates an aggregated value chain. So integration is also an ingredient of this transformation. And then it comes to inclusion. Because the orange economy is not about exclusivity. Because the talent is very well deployed in a society. Talent is not for the rich or for the poor or for the indigenous and the non-indigenous. It is very well deployed in society. This image is the Cateura Orchestra in Paraguay. That is one of the maybe most beautiful orchestras where the instruments come from recycled materials. And the reason why I want to share this with you is because the orange economy can provide inclusion to the sectors that are maybe most vulnerable in societies. So they can be employed, they can become entrepreneurs, and they can definitely change their way of living. One of the elements that we feel very proud about the Colombian experience is this, what we call the escuelas taller, those schools for arts and crafts that sustain the heritage, maintain the heritage, but they combine education with allowing the talent to have their own IP, their own signal, and be able to share that with the tourism community. So that is also a demonstration of why the orange economy in a country like Belize can be an instrument to defeat multidimensional poverty and allow an expansion, a rapid expansion of the middle class. And inspiration. Inspiration, which means how can we trigger others to embrace the orange economy? This is a beautiful image of Gabriel Garcia Marquez, inspired, writing, thinking of what he was going to put next on a paper. This is the demonstration, ladies and gentlemen. And I don't want to make here a optometry test for those in the back. I just want to show you how was the average investment in films in Colombia throughout the last years, and how when we created the fiscal incentive of 40% drawback, where we had that 40% given back to those who invested, it basically passed from the millions to the hundreds of millions. When you have the right fiscal incentives, the industry can make the largest change in an economy. And today we can say that one of the engines of post-COVID recovery in Colombia was the orange economy due to all these decisions that we made. So why do I believe the orange economy can be the best partner of the green and blue economy in Belize, Mr. Prime Minister and ladies and gentlemen? Because on the blue economy, you have what I call the Latin American Polynesia. You have one of the most beautiful coral reefs in the planet protected. You are now more than ever sharing with the world this heritage, patrimony, or treasure. And many people would love to come and visit and experience that great patrimony. But imagine if combined with the orange economy, and you start to establish more documentary sites, more film sites that are devoted to filming scenes and series related to the ocean and the coral reefs, that can also turn into a service economy, even for those artisanal fisheries that at some point were reluctant of seeing more protected areas because they thought their income was going to be affected. And the best way to say it is by declaring 30% of the territory a protected area. I feel so proud, Mr. Prime Minister, that you've made that decision, that you want to get to that 30%, that you want to get to that 30% in a fast way. When I assumed office, we had 13% of the Colombian territory declared a protected area. And we said we want to get to 30 by 30. But I said, let's make it 30 by 2022. We brought academia, the scientific community, and in fact, we were able to get to 34% of our maritime territory declared a protected area. And we sat down with other presidents, with Nito Cortizo from Panama, with Carlos Alvarado from Costa Rica, and with Guillermo Lasso from Ecuador. And we decided that as we expanded the protected areas, we created something that is called the Hermandad Maritime Protected Area, the largest maritime protected area in the world. And that is to demonstrate to the countries that have contributed to the climate crisis that we're not giving speeches, we're acting, we're delivering. But the beautiful thing is that if you combine that 30 by 30 declaration, you can also bring another solution, which is combine the protected areas with the energy transition. You have your protected areas, but you have areas that can be explored for energy transition. And that allows our countries to move faster when it comes to climate action. And many people thought that was not possible. Well, even in our country, when we decided to put together the legislation in favor of having 2 edge auctions for non-conventional energy, non-conventional renewable energy, we were able in just 2 years to inaugurate the largest wind park in Colombia called Guajira Uno. So I am pretty much certain that the protected areas that you will declare, the emphasis of the energy transition in Belize can bring that investment and can be combined with a strong green economy in which, as I want to share with you, the green finances is the right component. You have already done a blue bond. You have already seen the discounts and what can be possible to achieve. But Tomas, regional manager of the IDB, I think there are enormous opportunities in which the multilateral banking can make a difference. If Belize moves forward with the protected areas, maritime protected areas, debt swaps, full debt swaps, or even debt relief in favor of climate action advances, can become a fresh inflow of resources to keep on investing in protecting this beautiful patrimony for the world. But also, having the possibility of green bonds and blue bonds issued in the international markets with guarantees, or bilateral debt issues with guarantees, as Belize has already done in the case of DFC, but doing in a broader way with the multilateral banking can be another opportunity to bring the resources to this country. And imagine if you launch a green taxonomy like Colombia did. We launched the green taxonomy in the New York Stock Exchange with all the glossary of the environmental actions. Imagine that Belize can be the first Central American and also Caribbean country that can go to the markets and present a green taxonomy saying this is what we want to achieve, this is what we are committing for, and that can trigger the largest massive mobilization of green philanthropic capital to this country. It can happen, it should happen, and that's why the combination of these colors can lead to what I call the best mix with biotourism. Because today, the tourists are conscious and more conscious than ever. And you will have tourists that will come to visit this kind of beautiful places and waterfalls. But they will know that when they come to Belize and they invest $1 or a penny or $1,000 or $10,000, then they know that the impact this will make is to keep on transforming an economy that is committed to conservation, to protection, to talent, to culture, and also to defeating deforestation, making society more comfortable, more knowledgeable, more ethical about the protection of biodiversity. And as I can say from my own testimony visiting this amazing country, I believe the world needs to know more and more and more about Belize. That's why those three colors and the set of policies that I have described today, based on our experience, make me remember this movie starred by Kevin Costner called The Field of Dreams. There was this phrase that was mentioned throughout the whole movie. If you build it, they will come. The set of policies with the leadership that Prime Minister Briceño is giving to these topics, the possibility to have a permanent coordination at a cabinet level where there's no speeches but just moving forward by checking all the to-do lists in order to generate the massive mobilization of investment through incentives, but allowing the local communities, the indigenous communities, the Garífunas communities to integrate into this. I'm pretty sure that in less than a decade can double Belize GDP. And the government can play a very important role. There are many people who think the government should do everything. The government shall enable the talent and the opportunities of people to transform their economies. You're going to be sitting today in different panels. You'll talk about the blue economy, the green economy, but think of these three colors in which the actions of state policies over time can make Belize this country that will inspire and reference the whole continent as the country of orange, blue, and green. Thank you very much. Thank you.